Okay guys, today we're looking at this Console 1 from Softube. We're going to dive straight into it. The Console 1 is this dedicated hardware controller. It's all metal construction, metal back, metal sides, metal top panel. And this comes with an SSL 4000E channel strip plugin. You insert the channel strip plugin into the channels of your host sequencer DAW, and then you control the channel strip from the dedicated hardware controller. Okay. If we just run some audio, the hardware unit has an input and output meter, and these both switch to mono if you're controlling a mono channel. There's a gain reduction meter for the gate and the channel compressor, and all the controls have an LED indicator that dulls down at the off or 12 o'clock or 0 dB position. Okay. Now there's no DSP processing takes place in the hardware, so unlike an older product like Liquid Mix, the signal doesn't have to come from the host DAW to the hardware for processing and then back to the DAW, creating round-trip latency. The Console 1 channel strip is a native plugin. It runs at the same latency as any other plugin in your project, and that's controlled by the buffer size of your audio interface. So what I'll do is I'll create a new track, a mono audio track receiving on input 1, my mic input. Here's the track, here's its channel in Logic, and you just insert an instance of Console 1 into the channel. Now this is a mono track and channel, so I have the option to insert the Console 1 in mono or mono to stereo mode. Now if you insert an instance of Console 1 into a mono track and channel strip in mono, then everything works apart from the pan. And that's not a fault with Console 1, it's just how plugins work in host DAWs. Okay, and obviously if I'm inserting into a stereo track and channel, the option is stereo only, but for this mono track and channel, I'm going to insert an instance in mono to stereo mode like that. Boom. But that doesn't make the track and channel become stereo. Okay, the track and the channel all through the input is still mono, still a mono track and channel receiving on input 1, my mic input. But after the plugin, from then on down through the rest of the channel, everything's in stereo. Through any further plugins you might add after Console 1, down through the pan, the meter, which has switched to become a stereo meter, the fader, and off to the destination for that channel. Here's the host plugin wrapper. Obviously it's Logic, and Console 1 picks up the track channel number and the title of the channel and track automatically from the host DAW. You don't have to title each instance of Console 1. If I rename this track and channel to something like vocal, Console 1 picks that up instantly. You've got show knobs. It's a rough representation of the controls, but you can move these to adjust the channel strip. And each instance of Console 1 can be put into solo safe mode. I'll talk more about that and explain that for beginners at the end, because some less experienced people might be thinking of getting this product. Okay, now the good news is Console 1 is really light on the CPU, really light indeed. If I load up a larger project here. Okay, so here's a much larger project, and I've got 30 instances of Console 1 running here, as well as many other plugins, including 7 different guitar and bass amp modelling rigs. And even on this larger project, I'm not getting much CPU stress. If you look at the CPU meter here, there's always a spike when you first hit play in Logic, but after that, the meter settles down to about 50%. Yeah. And this is on an i5 quad-core 3.4 gig iMac with 8 gig of RAM, and the whole project is running at a buffer size of 64 samples. So if I want, I can use any instance of Console 1 in real time. Let's go to this vocal channel here. It's a mono channel with an instance of Console 1 on, followed by a reverb, and if I put it into input monitor mode, 1, 2, there is no noticeable latency at all. I could happily monitor through this and record a vocal, bass, a guitar, anything I want. So it's really light on the CPU, and you can use any Console 1 channel in real time if you want. Fantastic. So basically the way it works is you insert an instance of Console 1 into all the channels of your mix, including any group bus channels, and then optionally you can add Console 1 instances into auxiliary return channels and your final master left-right channel as well if you want. Then you bring up the on-screen display, And across the top of the hardware unit, you've got the 20 channel selector buttons to select the channel that you want to work on, that you want to control. And you've got a page up, page down button here. So you go to the page you want. This is page 1. There's my first 20 channels. I select the channel I want from that bank. Page up to the next channel. There's my final channels. Channels 21 to 30. After which I don't have any more instances of Console 1. But on larger projects, you can, page up through the pages. Channels 21 to 40, 41 to 60, 61 to 80, etc. Up and up and up. Yeah, the only limit to the amount of Console 1s you can run is the power of your CPU. And as we've seen, it's pretty light on the old CPU. Yeah. So you go to the set of 20 channels, the page of 20 channels you want, and you select the channel that you want to control and work on. Then you can solo it and work on it in solo mode, or have it unsoloed and just tweak the channel as you listen to the whole mix, etc, etc. Easy peasy, right? Now just a word about the on-screen display. The graphics are beautiful. It's one of the best I've seen, and the secret of this on-screen display is that it's not part of the plugin. It's not a pop-up being generated by the actual plugin. The on-screen display is a separate app, and on the Mac, look, here's its little menu up here on the top of the Mac there. All right, so it's a separate app that runs, and it acts as a communication buffer between the hardware unit and any instances of the plugin in your host DAW that you've selected with the channel button. And because it's a separate app, the graphics are beautiful, and you can make it full screen, even on a big screen like this 27-inch iMac. Full screen, the graphics are pristine, absolutely perfect. It's a beautiful on-screen display. And it's designed to work that way. In a bigger studio, you can have it on the monitor full screen, further back from where you work, and you can clearly see what's going on. But if you decide, well, you know what, I want to run it as a little float, I can move around, the graphics don't really degrade. They still look really, really crisp and beautiful. It's a beautiful on-screen display. And I found the way that I like to use it is like this. Full width, with a gap at the bottom, so I can see the bottom of my host DAW channels. And I do it that way for several reasons. One, I like to see the relationship between my DAW host channels and the equivalent channels on the Console 1 display. Second thing is, while there is a volume control for the Console 1, you can use this as the fader for each channel if you want to set your mix levels. I prefer to set my mix levels using the actual host DAW faders and reserve the volume control for just subtle tweaks to compensate for things I might be doing to the channel. And the other reason I like it like this is that I like to use a lot of group busing when I mix. And again, this is not a fault of Console 1, but it's a quirk with third-party plugins in a host DAW sequencer. If you want to solo a group bus, you can't do it with the solo on the Console 1 for that channel. You have to actually solo the host sequencer channel for that group bus. So here's my guitars group. If I want to listen to that and tweak that channel for this guitar group, I solo the group channel on the actual host sequencer, and then I choose the equivalent channel on Console 1, and then I'm controlling the Console 1 channel strip for that group bus, which I can hear and tweak while it's soloed. Okay, so that's why I have it with the bottom of my actual DAW mixer showing like that. Okay, so let's go to the smaller project here. Let's get rid of that track I just created. Okay, so here's the drum loop. There's only one instance of Console 1 running here, so the first channel here, channel 1, is pre-selected. Okay, and I want to get this channel back to a default state with no settings, so I load a preset for that preset. When you have a menu open, you use the volume control to select the menu item. So I'll load a factory channel strip preset. Solo is okay to go into a menu item, and I only have the 4000E emulation installed. That's the emulation installed on this channel with this instance of Console 1. So I go into that, and I'm going to load a preset for that, the default preset, which sets the channel to everything off. And mute when you're in a menu is cancelled to come out of a menu. Okay, so here's a virgin instance of Console 1. You can see the Solid State Logic logo. This is all approved by Solid State Logic. More on that in the second part and the end of the summing up. And Let's look at the channel. So starting with the input section, both the on-screen display and the hardware unit has a meter. On the hardware unit that becomes mono if you're working on a mono channel. So you've got a meter, you've got an input gain. I can trim my input gain. So I'll just bring it down a couple of dB like that. You've got a phase invert. You want to invert the phase on the channel. And you've got the SSL low and high cut. The low cut goes up to 6K, and the high cut goes down to 100 Hz. Okay, now if you just look at the roll off, which is fixed for the low and high cut, you'll see it's a bit steeper for the low cut. Yeah, well, the low cut is roughly 36 dB an octave, and the high cut is about 18 dB an octave. It's a bit more shallow, right? So you've got your low and high cut there, and they're very useful, and they can both be switched into the sidechain of the compressor. We'll look at that later. And then we're into the shaper section, which includes an expanded gate. And this is just brilliant, this section, it really is. The gate controller is the threshold, and as you can see from the display here, by default it's a softney gate, so it doesn't like cut the sound out completely when signals are below threshold. It rolls them off, really reduces them, ducks them down, and on loops, things like this drum loop, it's just fantastic for zoning in on the loud hits and ducking everything else down, really isolating those louder hits. You've got a release here which goes from 0.1 of a second to 4 seconds. And if you want, you can switch the gate into hard gate, in which case it just cuts the sound out when signals fall below threshold. Yeah, love this. I love this gate. It's just superb. On something like this loop, you know, I can reduce down. You know, with this soft gate. Softney gate as it is by default, it's severely ducking down everything between the loud hits, so you can hear the ride being ducked down in between the kicks, and it sounds a little bit unnatural now in isolation, but drop this loop into a composition with electronic drums and other things, and you won't hear that ride being ducked down. You won't notice that, and it just superbly isolates the hits. And on single sounds, it's got a great amount of control. It's fantastic for ducking down the noise behind things, and it doesn't sound unnatural. Fantastic. But also on this section, you've got something that wasn't on the original console, the 4000D. Softube have added their own transient shaper in the form of the punch and sustain control that goes with it. And the punch in positive values adds punch, and in negative values from 12 o'clock takes away punch. And it really does what it says. It really adds punch. And the sustain in forward from 12 o'clock in positive sustained, it adds more and more sustain. It adds more and more how that effect of punch is being held. And when the punch is positive and then you roll off the sustain in negative values from 12 o'clock, it just reduces how long that punch is held for, more and more and more, and it becomes more and more clipped. If you roll the punch off from 12 o'clock in negative values, it takes away punch, and at extreme values, the initial attack of the sound is sort of faded up very quickly, which is exaggerated by adding more sustain positive value. Reduce the sustain, and that subtle fading up becomes more and more clipped until you're just getting like that. But it's fantastic, this section. Very, very creative, as well as being just, you know, a general processing type control section. And you really can get the dynamics of the sound sorted in this section fantastically before you even get into the rest of the channel. It's just brilliant, this. I love it. Okay, and then we're into the EQ. This is based on the the black knob EQ. You've got a low band and a high band that can be bell, cut or shelf, and you've got a pair of parametric mids. Okay, all 4 bands, the gain is 18 dB boost or cut. So the low band in default bell, it's a fairly tight Q, it's fixed. You've got 18 dB of boost or cut, and the low band goes from 30 Hz to 450. Or you can switch it into a low cut, it's a fixed to roll off, so the gain does nothing in cut. Again, 30 Hz to 450. Or you can put it in a low shelf, 18 dB of boost or cut, and it goes from 30 Hz to 450. Yeah. Okay, and the high band is the same but in reverse. You've got a high bell, it's got a fixed Q, and a high band only got 18 dB of boost or cut. The high band goes from 16K to 1.5K. Or you can switch it into a high cut. Again, it's a fixed roll off, the gain doesn't work when it's in cut mode, and it goes from 16K down to 1.5K. And finally, high shelf. Boom, 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 high shelf. 18 dB of boost or cut, and it goes from 16K down to 1.5K. Yeah. If we look at the high and the low bell, it's a fixed Q for the bell. You'll see that the high bell has a much wider Q like that. Look, much wider. And if we put them both into cut, just like on the low and high cut filters, the low band has got a steeper roll off than the high band. So I'll just put those back into the default bell and get them down to 0. Like that. Okay, and then you've got the 2 mids, 18 dB of boost or cut. They've both got a Q that goes to 3, which is fairly tight. You can be pretty surgical with them. And the low mid goes from 200 Hz to 2.5K, 18 dB of boost or cut. Okay, and the high mid, again it's got a Q that goes to 3, fairly tight. And that goes from 7K down to 600 Hz, 18 dB of boost or cut. That's the EQ. It's got a sound. It really has. It's a nice gritty analog-like sound. I mean, I've got a few mixers still, and I've worked on a whole bunch of different consoles all down through the last 30 whatever years, and owned a few others in the past. And it has got an analog-y soundness. It really does. It a little bit reminds me of an old console I used to have. A bit of an odd one, which sadly I lost when my studio was raided. And they stole everything, smashed the door in and stole everything. But I had this really unusual handmade British console, and it was a monster console. It was huge, completely modular, 24 into 4 into 2, and I found it in a warehouse for a PA company in Essex or somewhere like that, and some guy knew a tech came over and we worked on it for a couple of months part-time, just fixing it all up. It was a bit noisy, we didn't recap it or change any of the chips, but it had a sound, it really did. And it was like a Neve style EQ on each channel, 4-band EQ, and the top and the bottom EQ band could be switched between 3 different centre frequencies, then boost or cut, and the 2 mids had a 5-way switch to choose the centre frequency and boost or cut. And I'll tell you, with an Atari, it really had a sound, and this has got something of that. There's a gritty analog-ish quality to it. It's hard to describe, but it's almost, there's a metallic quality to the high mids, if I could say that. I don't know, but it really does have a sound. And it's a surprisingly versatile EQ. It really is. In combination with the low and the high cut, you can do a lot with it. The mids are pretty surgical if you want them to be. You think, okay, look, I want to put a little bump on my low end, so I'll get a little bump going like that, adjust the Q, and then roll that down to 100 Hz. Oh wait, the low mid doesn't go down to 100 Hz. Well, no worries, man. You just use the bottom band in bell mode, get your little bump there at 100 Hz. It's a fairly tight Q. Okay, so there's my little bump at 100 Hz now, and then I think, oh, but wait, I wanted to use the low band to do a low cut to roll off the bottom end. Well, you've still got the low and high cut filter here you can use, and I can roll off my clutter at the bottom end, any mud and rubbish I don't need down the bottom end, with the low cut filter. I've still got my 2 mids. I can tighten up the Q on that and do a little dip, about 300 Hz there, just after the bump, like that, just to give it a little dip down there, scoop that out a little bit. And I've still got the high mid there, and I can use that to give myself a little bit of a bump there around 2K-ish. And then the top end, I've still got the high cut here I can use if I want to roll off the top end, but I've got the high here, the high band here. I can use it in bell, or I can use it in high shelf, so I'll put it in a shelf here and just give it a bit of a lift there at about 10k. You know what I mean? It's a really nice EQ, very nice, very very versatile. It's got a sound. The other thing is the pots, and this is for the pots generally, but while we're on the EQ, they've got a really nice hardware-like feel to them, really smooth. And they've got a kind of velocity-sensitive quality to them. If I really boost this low mid, and I can move the frequency control in big movements, like if I move the pot hard, like that. But I can slow down, and it just jumps along in little 100 Hz or so jumps, if I'm less aggressive. But if I want the finest movement of all, I just hold down the shift fine adjust, and then I'm in single digit increments for really fine adjusting. Yeah, a nice feel to them. This kind of, you can use them to do big movements or fine, whatever you like. And the other thing is, they're not centre detented, but for any part that has an off or 12 o'clock position, you find it's, although there's no centre detent, the range around the 12 o'clock or off position or 0 position is a bit wider, so you just give it a twist and, most of the time you're at 0, or a little twist and you're there. What I'm saying is, you're not like with some hardware controllers desperately sort of hunting around going, oh too far, trying desperately to get it to set to 0. Same for something like the pan here, just 0, yeah. Really nice. And lastly, just to say about these mids, with the variable Q, some EQs, whether the variable Q or not, they have this quality that the more, let's just roll that down a bit, the more you boost or cut, they start to tighten up, become peakier and peakier and peakier the more you boost or cut, and then you roll off and they start to get less peaky and widen out. These they don't do that. Whatever you fix the Q to, it stays true to that no matter how much you cut or boost. I really do like the EQ a lot. It's it's got a sound. It does. It's, as I say, surprisingly versatile. So yeah, that's the EQ. And then we're into the channel compressor. A fantastic little compressor. This has really got a tight sound. You've got a ratio which goes to infinity if you want to do hard limiting. Threshold. Your attack goes down to very fast 3 milliseconds. And then it will really just snatch the sound, you know, before it can really get anywhere. Up to 30 milliseconds. The release, like on the gate, goes from 0.1 of a second up to 4 seconds. And one thing that's super cool about this channel compressor is it's got a parallel wet-dry mix built in. If you're a bit new to this and you don't understand that, well, normally this is set completely to wet, which means the signal's passing completely through the compressor in the normal way. But you can roll it up to dry, in which case you're only listening to the dry signal and no compression at all. Then you can blend in as much compression with the dry signal as you want, which is called parallel compression, and you can do that within the channel. It's fantastic. You haven't got to bother setting up an auxiliary send to a auxiliary return and whacking a compressor on that and everything. Yeah, you'll still do that from time to time, obviously, but to get certain things you want. But you've got this ability to do parallel compression within a channel. It's fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. Yeah. So that's the channel compressor. Great little compressor, and the high and low cut filters can be switched into the sidechain of the compressor. Now the sidechain can also take an external signal. We'll look at that in the next bit when we get into some of the other details. And then you're at the output section. You've got an output meter that works in mono. If it's a mono channel you're controlling. You've got the pan, which will work if you've got a stereo instance of console 1 or a mono to stereo instance you're controlling. And you've got solo to solo the channel, and mute to mute the channel, and the volume, as I mentioned. Okay. That sets the level leaving the channel strip plugin. And then you've also got this drive and drive character pair of controls, and this is fantastic. It really is. This is a harmonic distortion circuit and or emulation. Now the manual says if you set it to, you don't have to have it on, but if you set it to a value of 5, the drive, then that adds the harmonic distortion characteristics of an SSL 4000E channel. That's the emulation we're working with here, right? Now it's incredibly subtle. If you can hear it at all, what could you say? It's adding a little bit of airiness to the upper mids, but it's super subtle if you can hear it. But this is an accumulative effect. It's incredibly subtle on a single channel, but in a mix with 20, 30, 40 channels all with that on, it all accumulates up, builds up, and it adds that overall glue to your mix. But you can drive the hell out of this if you want to get a really heavily driven channel. You know, I can drive it like mad. And the character control here, push it that way from centre, clockwise, and it adds more harmonic distortion to the upper frequencies, and the other way more harmonic distortion to the bottom end frequencies. So it's like a tone control, more trebly, more mid bass. You can really hammer the crap out of the channel. Fantastic, bloody great this is. And that's it basically. That's your channel. The 3 centre sections have this wonderful ability to be switched in and out. Fantastic. I mean, really invaluable for comparing on and off states, you know, with or without EQ, with or without shaper, with or without compression. Also, the signal passes through the channel strip plugin in the order you see it laid out here. So after the input, the signal passes through the shaper gate, then through the equalizer, then through the compressor, and then to the output. But you can change the order of the signal passing through the 3 sections. You can switch it to SC EQ, so that the signal after input travels through the shaper, then the compressor, then the EQ, or you can switch it so the signal travels through the EQ, then the shaper, then the compressor. or the default shaper EQ compressor. Really cool that. Depending how you've got this set, it allows you to add a little bit of extra creativity to the way that you're building a sound. You know, yeah, for example, having your EQ before the compressor is obviously going to radically change what the compressor's doing, etc. Or shape a compressor then the EQ, so you get the compression before any EQ, etc. Yeah, really nice, really nice. It's well thought out, this thing, and built like a tank. It really is. So there's your basics. Okay, it's a great product, and I will be buying this. I'm going to be talking to the company next week about paying for and keeping this demo model. So that's it for the basics. Just to tell you, this is on a special deal, reduced by £100, €100, $100, or slightly more than that reduction. So at the moment you can get this for £480, which is superb value. If you want SSL in the box mixing, authorised by SSL, what are your options? Well, you either go with this, which has the dedicated hardware controller, or you go for the Waves SSL plugins, but you don't get a hardware controller, and the Waves ones I think even cost a bit more than this, or you go for the UAD emulation, but you need the hardware to run that because it runs off an accelerator card, a DSP card here. So this is fantastic. And the other two options, there may be other SSLs, authorised strips, I don't think there is, but those other two don't have the controller. And trust me, you get into this and getting away from the bloody mouse, you know, all the time, it's great. You soon find yourself getting to grips with it. It's fantastic. You can, you know, stand back from the mix, step forward, choose a channel, give it a little tweak, step back, you know, and start to work like with a real console. Great, fantastic. So it's on special deal, check it out. And I'm going to stop here and then come back with the second part where we're going to look at the extras, the menus and options. We'll also look at the side chaining for the compressor and the gate. We'll also look at the solo safe. I'll show you how that works for people less experienced who might be thinking of buying this. And we'll also quickly show that all the hardware controls, they write track automation. Okay, this is not a general purpose MIDI controller. You can't use this to control a synth or something. It only controls console 1, but it does write track automation if you want to do that. We'll quickly look at that as well. Yeah, so console 1, 10 out of 10, fantastic, and on deal till January the 7th, 2016, and I will see you for part 2.